Sentiment is favorable out here for Doge, I would say.
Sentiment on Elon is shifting in really interesting ways. The swing voters on Elon, I think, are turning a little more negative.
What Elon did at Twitter or X, it was just rip everything out, see what needs to be plugged back in. It's very difficult to rehire or just hire federal employees at all. I kind of think they might be handing the Democrats a weapon, which just is to say, oh, you missed this. The opposition are the people who get to plug it back in.
I was in Washington talking to a prominent Silicon Valley person who was saying, you guys in Washington, particularly the Democrats, have DOGE all wrong. It's really not an ideological project. Like, if you knew these kids, like, they're just like working so hard to make government more efficient. So I sort of had that in my head. And I the next day ran into a friend who's a very well-connected Republican lawyer and said, I feel like DOGE is getting a bad rap. And he said, yeah, that's totally true. Everybody thinks it's these coders and they're like doing efficiency stuff, but it's all lawyers who used to work for Ron DeSantis who are executing incredibly well on this ideological project of tearing out all the liberal ideology. And these idiots in Silicon Valley are giving incredible cover to them, making all this noise. But nobody believes in that.
Big announcement, folks. Our husbands have gone on yet another epic adventure together.
But fear not, because our AI voice cloned husbands are here to help intro this week's episode. It's the least we could ask for while me and Jess hold down the fort, the children, the companies, and the bulk of the pod this week.
Meanwhile, Dave and I are the ones really putting ourselves in harm's way, confronting death daily here in Alaska while chasing insane powder. Honestly, we're the real victims here.
Yeah, I don't know if victims is the word, but seriously, since we're clearly being replaced, who do you guys have filling in for us this week?
Don't worry, Jess and I searched long and hard and found a couple of adequate men.
Yes, they are the type of men who make far fewer inappropriate jokes and also know how to say a proper goodbye when on a live video recording.
Wow, this is the things we get for risking an avalanche to call in?
All right. You boys have had your fun. Now go enjoy the rest of your skiing while me and Jess stay focused on what's actually happening in Silicon Valley.
Honestly, this trip is kind of like early stage investing. High risk, questionable visibility, and Sam talking me into something I'll probably regret.
Sounds about right. Okay, we've got work to do. Farewell, husbands.
See you guys soon.
Later, wives.
All right, that was fun, but let's start the real intro, shall we, Jess?
Why, hello. Welcome to another episode of More or Less, a very, very special episode of More or Less. So I am here with Brit. Hey, Brit.
Hello, how are ya?
I'm a little tired since our husbands are off gallivanting in the powder snow of Alaska.
We know who really keeps these families and these companies moving, don't we, Jess?
Well, I'd like to return to a happy husband, so I'm not going to go down that road.
ROI of a ski trip is actually net positive for us. I understand that math.
Yes, I agree. But we are very lucky because we brought in some really special reinforcements. And before I introduce our reinforcements, I have to say, for almost 100 episodes, I have been the one journalist among 3 venture capitalists on this podcast. And I am really happy to have turned the tables, Brit, because now you are the one venture capitalist to the 3 journalists.
Fair. And Brit & Co.'s lifestyle media. So I'm like halfway.
Yeah. Oh, you're a media person.
I'm a media person, but journalism is a whole nother level. So I'm feeling a little insecure right now, but I think that's a good thing.
Well, that's how I feel every week. So not really, actually, but we'll pretend. I am so happy Ben Smith is here, founder and editor-in-chief of Semafor, co-founder, right? Am I going to get in trouble if I call you the founder?
I think we're relaxed about it. It's not Silicon Valley. We're not obsessed with this stuff.
And also previously the editor of BuzzFeed News. Ben, thank you for joining.
Thanks.
Where
for
are you joining
me.
from?
From New York City.
Amazing. And another New York media mogul in the making. You feel like a mogul in the making or a mogul?
No, I just think a mogul, I think.
Both of them are moguls. I didn't want to imply, that would be very horrible of me. I would hate if people called me a mogul in the making. But yet, Nick Carlson, who is the founder of the stealth Dynamo, previously at Business Insider. Thanks for being here, guys.
My pleasure. Definitely in the making. We have some work to do, but we're on the way,
Give us I get a lot. I'm a very happy investor in both of your publications. Although, you could give me more of your financials. I know how happy I am, but that's a separate question. Everybody knows Semafor, amazing global business publication. If you aren't reading it, you absolutely need to for what's going on in DC and around the world. You also need to listen to Ben's podcast, Mixed Signals, which is excellent.
Thank you.
Nick, give everyone what you want to say about Dynamo right now, which is very stealthy.
Yeah, it's stealthy, although we published our first short video yesterday on LinkedIn.
Hey, congratulations.
So we are actually a publisher now. Dynamo is a video network. We are for people who believe business explains the world. And so we're going to launch our first show on YouTube, and we'll put it other places also in the next month or so. It's going to be called Business Explains the World. And we have a saying about it, which is for that show, business isn't the question, it's the answer. So like, why are things the way they are? And because of business. And so it's really for people who remember that Steve Jobs quote where he said, if you look around, everything was invented. And so we think that's pretty inspiring. We kind of want to.
Invented by people that are no smarter than you are. I think that's a key part of the line.
Exactly. Yes.
Everyone can be an entrepreneur. Everyone can be in business. I'm not obsessed with Steve Jobs right now wearing my black turtleneck.
I was going to say, Brit, you're looking very Jobsian in this moment.
It's a little too Jobsian for me. I didn't intend that today, but here I am. All right.
Nick, is Business Explains the World the sequel to Follow the Money?
Oh.
Are those related? Are they cousins?
Yeah, sure. And it comes in a tradition of this kind of thing, like Freakonomics and Planet Money. And this has been, this is a thing that people, I wouldn't have tried to create a media property in this space if I didn't feel like there was a market for it. And there has been other media properties addressing that market. We just sort of see video as a sort of under-addressed area for this and a huge opportunity. And so, Follow the Money is a good way of looking at it. Yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't advise that as a slogan. It's sort of old, but tired. But awesome. Well, we are thrilled to have you guys this week. Brit and I want to talk about a lot of topics, including the seismic news story of the week that I know, Ben, you're probably texting now, maybe signaling now, as you just nonstop coverage of Jeffrey Goldberg at The Atlantic being added to the Signal chat. But we'll want to dig into all the things that you guys are taking away from that in this moment. And then also some of the big headlines out of Silicon Valley as well, where we get to live inside, you both get to be familiar observers. Brit, is there any other stuff we want to cover? Any pop culture or what before we dig into it?
I think just like we have these two media moguls on, and I think what's happening with AI in media and kind of your point of view on where this whole industry goes. Like I've been playing around with so many new tools, like the new ChatGPT video image generator that just launched this week, and some secret stuff that's going to come out soon. And
the Morans and the secret stuff.
I voice cloned our husbands for the intro for this pod. And so I have like all kinds of questions and ideas and thoughts, but I'd love to get Ben and Nick's as well.
Okay. Well, let's start with the news. So I'm curious, Ben, when you first, I don't know, how did you first read the Atlantic story, hear about it, and what was your first reaction? I mean, people should know you started your career as a political blogger at Politico, right? Or I don't know if that was the beginning, but
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, yes, I've known Jeffrey for a long time, and I mean, my reaction was just like absolute burning jealousy.
Yeah,
and envy.
You could have easily been on that chat too. I mean, you're in the same Rolodexes of these cabinet members.
Well, don't you think though that as a reporter, there's something like there's a kind of news. It's my only real superstition that there's a kind of news luck, and some people have it. I wasn't that I had it. Like sometimes you just wind up in a room, somebody invites you to a thing. Who knows? I think Jessica, you have had it in your career too. Like reporters who get scoops have a kind of luck.
You got yourself in trouble for being at like an Ariana Huffington Uber dinner. Yeah.
It's just incredible karma. And then, I mean, I think, Trump has had this remarkable 3 months and I think we looked at, I'm not sure we'll say that he got a lot done. I think the jury is very, very much out on like, wait, what exactly didn't get held up in court and what happened, but of absolutely dominating the narrative, which is in some ways how they keep score. And I think this was certainly the first massive breach in that. And it'll be interesting to see whether they can really regain it.
Nick, what about you? What was going through your head? And also just how, I mean, not to chime in, but I was just very impressed with how the Atlantic handled everything from the story itself to the very consistent communication, marketing of it.
No, I mean, I just imagine being Jeffrey just sitting there and then boop, it little pops up and you're like, no. And I think I loved in his story how he said, like, there's just no way. I assumed all the way until the very last moment that this was a fake and someone was trying to entrap me, which I think is probably what I would have thought too. And so, no, I thought they handled it really well. And I mean, isn't it great when a story is built around something you can screen grab and natural dialogue to it? And so it was really well done. You know?
And sort of could have, and honestly, a story that kind of could happen to anybody, like everyone has at some point added somebody accidentally to the group chat. And so, I mean, I think it was a very easy story to understand and tell. And I want to know how Silicon Valley's reacting. I mean,
how?
Yeah, I mean, my first, okay, it's really interesting to hear the journalist's first thought was like, I'm so jealous, like he got the story. And my first thought was like the technologist thought, which is just like, another reason why contact lists suck. And like, like we're in 2025 and we have all this AI and all this cool shit and drones fighting wars for us. And we still can't make sure we have like authenticated contacts in our Signal chats. That was like my first reaction. And my second reaction was like,
it didn't cross my mind at all.
My second reaction was just like, I mean, everyone's freaking out that Signal is this app that's being used by government officials, but it's literally been used for years by government officials. It doesn't seem like that strange to me. This was human error, not a technology error. And so like, yes, we need tighter systems around these things. And we could build like more authenticated, like multi-factor auth of contact lists or something into the chats themselves. But it's not weird to me that Signal is used by these types of people. My question for Nick and Ben was like, okay, so you're this reporter and I don't know him. I'm assuming you guys do. And you're like, okay, you're screenshotting. You're like, holy shit, I'm going to fucking crush this week. And the Atlantic, we're going to get so many new subscribers. And you take it back to the Atlantic. And what do? Do you have like a war room? And you're like, how should we go about like launching this?
Question.
And like, what's the marketing around this? What's the business model? How do we like make this about the people in the news, but kind of drive some traffic to the Atlantic and get people to pay us? Like, what's that conversation like?
It's funny because I think that like you're thinking like an entrepreneur, which, fortunately maybe Jessica is and my partner is like, I would just think what an amazing story, right? And like, this is crazy. And particularly the interplay where Vance is sort of saying like, I don't think Trump really knows what we're doing here. He's a little lost. And like Vance is really exposing something there that's really complicated and is going to play out for the next 4 years. And I think Jeffrey was, I actually think there's like the moment when you start to, and this is actually like a common Silicon Valley misconception that we are like obsessed with clicks as opposed to interested in information.
Oh, yeah, no.
And so I think actually my guess is that he was just like fascinated by this thing as it played out. Of course, also part of that is what an amazing story. I can't wait to like tell everyone this story. But the marketing, I mean, the stuff markets itself.
But is there also like a security issue in marketing the story? Like if you're Jeffrey, are you like, I should like blur some of these things because like I don't want to give our defense secrets out?
Yeah,
like,
he did. I mean, what's fascinating is so he redacted a lot, and then just today, in light of the fact that all the people involved continue to testify that no classified information was leaked.
Okay, that's where we saw the reals. Okay, yeah. I saw screenshots of like all the specifics. Okay, never mind. Then I give him that.
Yeah, I'm curious, Ben, too. So when you got over the shit why wasn't I added, and just sort of that giddiness of like how much fun he's having, which I also felt like I'm like, this has got to be really fun. What is your analysis on like the severity of this, and what's sort of playing out now in Washington with the grilling of these officials?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like, Brit has a real point. Like, good that they're using Signal. These are people who have to talk to each other, and it's actually a much better way to communicate than an open phone line or text. And so like, and in fact, they had been told by the Pentagon they should be using Signal, except that, if any of their, like, there's an enormous effort by the Russians and the Chinese, who are really good at this stuff, and probably the Israelis and others, to compromise the devices of these specific guys. One of them was in Russia while this is going on. Stephen Witkoff. What are the odds that the Russians are reading these as they come in? I don't know. 1 in 3, 1 in 4. They're not 0. You don't have to compromise signal to get to that, right? You just have to get to the screen of the phone.
Barack Obama wasn't allowed to use his BlackBerry.
No, they had a special giant. And like there's a lot of over-classification, over-security. There's a lot of stuff that shouldn't be secret that's secret. Like even if they're talking about policy or whatever, like most of that stuff isn't that shocking. But if you're going to say, we're going to try to kill this guy in this place in 2 hours, and you're doing it and it's being displayed on the screen. And the Houthis are via Iran, the allies of the Russians. So like the Russians see that, I would assume they're going to call up that guy and say, hey, you should watch out for that house. So it was a pretty it was unbelievably sloppy and messy thing to do. And actually, of all of them, everything, a lot of it is sort of, if this leaks, how bad really is it? Vance looks a little obnoxious, except for Hegseth dumping all of the details of what's going to happen in 2 hours into the chat. Like that.
I mean, timing, weapons involved, targets, right?
Yeah,
this is
and that's
all
the part where even Republicans who never crossed Trump, like Roger, and who crossed Trump a little, like Senator Wicker, is now going to lead some bipartisan inquiry. Like that's where it kind of crossed the line.
So is he toast?
No, but I think the Trump people's view is you can't start throwing people overboard. So I think no. And in fact, they seem to be madder at Mike Waltz that he had Jeffrey Goldberg's number in his phone than they are mad at Pete Hegseth. And Waltz isn't seen as a MAGA true believer, and so a lot of knives are out for him.
Yeah, I was going to say for Brit's question, which I think is an interesting one on process. I think what happens is, you start writing, and then you start talking to other editors. He's like, how do we do this? He obviously brought in this Harris reporter to go do some field work and figure out what it looks like. And then you talk to lawyers, and then you figure out like, what's our risk level here? Are we going to die because we published this? And then you go talk to Laureen Powell Jobs, right? And she knows
who owns the Atlantic.
Yes, she knows this is coming before it comes, and
it all comes back to jobs.
back to
But like you probably, I mean, and then at some point you call the White House, which they did, and you probably do that. I mean,
do you not just text the chat? I was sort of surprised you didn't just drop into the chat.
I know, I thought so too,
and be like, "Hey guys, it was nice of you to add me to this. This was super interesting. Planning to publish in 24 hours, in 12 hours. If you guys have any comment."
Would you have done that, Ben?
Yes.
Would you have done that for real?
Well, it seems like the most direct, straightforward way to do it.
Gosh, you journalists. Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, but there's nothing misleading about that. It's bold.
Well, you want them to know the story is coming. I mean, it's not going to be published in a secret magazine.
No, but you look, you obviously call for comment and tell them the story's coming. And actually from the very first, or from the moment it was published, the story had a comment from the White House verifying the chat. So they obviously went to them.
And the White House comment was smart. It was like, look, this is a real reflection of our wise deliberations. Like,
and how hard we're working for the American people with all of our emojis. So many flag emojis. I was like, I get it, but I don't get it, guys. Like,
it reminded me of a Slack channel. I was talking to Henry, who's my working with him on Dynamo.
Henry Blodgett, our audience knows.
Yeah, there you go. And he's like, it's like they won an ad deal,
Yeah.
Great job, guys.
Yeah, and honestly, the risk is that the Trump in the first term was what I think wound up being perceived as just like the gang who can't shoot straight. Yeah. And they have worked so hard. In this term, it's like, wow, they're running the table. They know what they're doing. And then you look at their chats and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you were saying before they had this like 3 months of like one after another, but it felt like a lot of noise and a lot of like proclaiming we did things. And I think it is making people kind of like real and almost like it's one of these things like, the people they want to feel afraid of all the action definitely feel afraid of all the action. But you just like one little pinprick and it's like, really did much happen? And boy, the markets are a mess. And are these tariffs on or are they not on? Or like, where are we? What's going on?
How is this changing the future of ethics processes?
So great for Signal.
Trust in these institutions. And so we have the media companies, we have the social media companies, we have government. Like, how are each of these impacted going forward?
I do think that the Trump folks communicate in modern ways, and like that, although this was really, I mean, incredibly dumb, and particularly just the part where Hegseth is sort of telling the Houthis' friends when they're going to get attacked, basically, like really dumb. But the fact that they communicate like normal people on, in real time, as opposed to having can only talk to each other by huddling in basement skiffs once a month or whatever, like and I think that's, there's sort of been an acceleration into the present that's in a lot of the Trump team's communications, whether it's public or among themselves, that I don't think people should necessarily like mock or object to. But it does make it hard to sort of respect government. This is actually an old Julian Assange theory that kind of like government can't function if it doesn't have secrets, because once you see the sort of, random people doing random stuff that is any institution, it can't function anymore and it loses its prestige. But I think that aside from Hegseth's texts, it just reveals a kind of normalcy actually to the.
So you thought everything was copacetic until the operational details?
I mean, it was embarrassing, but how many embarrassing internal conversations are there in any organization?
But there was nothing that like compromised national security or nothing that
I'm not an expert on that, but it didn't seem terrible that they're using better Signal than other platforms, right?
I liked what Goldberg said when he said it was nice to see them disagreeing with each other. And like, that was, like they're having a debate, and, that's on some level.
Until the person who identified himself as Stephen Miller came in and ended the debate, right? I mean, I get
and that was really revealing.
We'll broaden now to this broader DC and DOGE and other things. But I think what I also loved about the article is they called out the things they thought were important and notable in a way that didn't seem heavy-handed, but seems like it was drawing your attention to the right things. And I'm sure some people would view that as too heavy-handed, but to me, it was just so artfully done to give context around what might be usual or unusual, while still being so careful, to describe the senders as people identified as these people, maybe because you don't know who was behind the phone actually texting. The story has obviously had is resonating out here in the Valley too. And I'm curious where there's so much disdain for reporting and the press and obviously a lot of that tone sent from the Trump administration. But I think it is still something that you can really point to as now, on the other hand, it was accidental. So
you don't have to, I think the thing with good reporting is you can hate the press, you can hate the reporter, whatever. You have to reckon with the reality of this thing.
Yes. Is it going to win a Pulitzer?
No, and Pulitzer only goes to things that look like newspaper articles from the 1970s.
Yes.
That's a requirement.
Yes. I completely agree with that, but I'm also wondering how you could ignore this. So we shall
There's
see.
Not really a category for it.
It's too good.
Is Pulitzer still like, is that like the prize?
Well, you guys both have them. Both of your news organizations have them, right?
So my thesis about Pulitzers is that when a new media company wins a Pulitzer, you can just set the clock on layoffs.
The information has never won a Pulitzer.
Don't.
Is that like on your OKR list, Jess? Is this like you're striving?
Don't do it.
We're striving for everything, Brit, but always be striving. Okay, so we have this seismic earthquake through DC. We also have DOGE. So out here, we like to talk about DOGE.
What do you say?
Yeah, I want to know.
Yeah, what do you say when you talk about DOGE?
Well, it's interesting. This is what we do. In our coffee shops in Silicon Valley, we sit down with people and they're like, I don't know what Elon's up to, but my buddy at DOGE is working really hard. Or I'm in a group chat with two people at DOGE and they point out that there's so much bad, hopefully there's so much bad press, but like there's so much other stuff that isn't happening that we're talking about. So that's kind of the vibe out here.
Sentiment is favorable out here for DOGE, I would say. Wouldn't you, Jess? I would say it's like 75% positive.
Well, I say, so sentiment is favorable. Maybe it was 75, but sentiment on Elon is shifting in really interesting ways. I think the Tesla's real business challenges are definitely, people out here aren't burning their cyber trucks, which my kids call psycho trucks, and I'm kind of into it. But there is this real sense that, Tesla is imperiled in a way it hasn't been before. And And so I don't know. The Elon, there's always his adherents and true believers, and they're never going to change. But like the swing voters on Elon, I think are turning a little more negative. And there is just this question of like, how long will he be able to focus on Doge if Tesla really, really tanks? And also the sense that like, you know, he's been talking a lot about the robots at Tesla. We had a whole episode on the Morin's love of robots. And the sense that he might like kind of even be giving up on the car business for the robot business, which is kind of crazy. So that's what people here think about Doge. What about out there?
Well, when I look at Doge, I mean, I come from looking at the business side of things with what Elon did at Twitter or X. It was just rip everything out, see what needs to be plugged back in. And, so they're going to now have to try to plug things back in. And two thoughts about that. One is that it's very difficult to rehire or just hire federal employees at all. There's a sort of, Ben might know more about it, but it's sort of, there's like this lots of bureaucracy around, approving any hire. So you can't just stick them back in. Very difficult to do. And then the other thing is, because it's so hard, I kind of think they might be handing the Democrats like a weapon, which just is to say like, oh, you missed this. Well, the opposition are the people who get to plug it back in, And so to me, it's messy. It's ineffectual. It doesn't look like it. Like everyone agrees. I think very bipartisan issue. You said everybody loves Doge out there, but it's like, people like the idea of more efficiency. They think there's too many government employees, but in a way, the way he's doing it just seems like it's kind of like a guy, like like someone's in the garage just chucking things behind them. And it's like things are clanging all over the place. And it's like, it needs to last and it doesn't feel like it's going to last. And so that's how it looks to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to, I was in Washington talking to somebody you guys know, a prominent Silicon Valley person, who was saying, you guys in Washington, particularly the Democrats, have DOGE all wrong. It's really not an ideological project. Like if you knew these kids, like they're just like working so hard to make government more efficient. Obviously, a lot of the people working on the project do think that's what they're doing. A lot of it's now held up in court, but like just the idea that government can function well, like that would be nice. And I sort of had that in my head, and I was the next day ran into a friend who's a very well-connected Republican lawyer, and said, I feel like DOGE is getting a bad rap, and he said, yeah, that's totally true. Everybody thinks it's these coders, and they're like doing efficiency stuff, but it's all lawyers who used to work for Ron DeSantis who are executing incredibly well on this ideological project of tearing out all the liberal ideology. And these idiots from Silicon Valley are giving incredible cover to them, making all this noise, but nobody believes in that.
Whoa.
So I think they're different. I think it's sort of Rashomon thing. There are different ways of looking at it.
Whoa, that is so fascinating. And I think I was talking about this, maybe Ben, with you on the pod, but like these really are two different species of people, the tech people and the Washington people, so much so that they can be working on the same project in the same room and think they're doing different things.
Totally different things.
That's crazy.
What is the Silicon Valley view of Elon Musk right now and like this project overall? I know Doge is popular, but is he considered to be someone who's like effective and he knows what he's doing? Or is it kind of like, I kind of see the Trump presidency as a thing that some people in Silicon Valley decided they could buy and they bought it. And how do they feel about the product right now? Do they feel like they got a lemon, or like what are the feelings?
I would say not 75%, but maybe 60-40 favorable to Elon out here. And I think it's because there's just so many fanboys and a few fangirls of SpaceX and the rockets, and they caught them on toothpicks and humanoid robots and autonomous vehicles and X. And it's, we just all love X out here in Silicon Valley. And so like, he's going to figure it out, even if it's weird right now. And he's just being Elon. He's in his tiny little office. He's doing the work. He doesn't have to do this. And so it's kind of like he's the greatest entrepreneur of all time. And we believe he's going to pull through, even if it doesn't look super seamless right now. So I say 60-40 positive sentiment. What about you, Jess?
I think a lot of people think that, and they would say, but I don't like the guy. Seems like a jerk. seems like a bad person or something. Like they might add that. And again, that's like their opinion.
That's like literally what my parents say about Trump. Like, I don't like him as a person, but I think he's a good president.
And it's interesting. I mean, I think there's been it's hard to find a successful entrepreneur in Silicon Valley now who has not fashioned himself in as an Elon. I mean, I pretty much think, and I'm 1,000% sure that Sam Altman thinks he's following Elon's path. And there's just so many people. It was just so in the culture to the point that like you kind of can't be anti-Elon in Silicon Valley in a sense, because it would be like being anti-innovation and entrepreneurship. So I think that runs deep. What I'm just picking up on is more of the, but Tesla's really maybe going to zero. But, what about this issue? I mean, look, car companies are hard to begin with. And when you start not making enough cars, things go south very fast because of how, this is what I'm learning, the operational efficiencies of car companies work. So like you don't have a huge buffer to like miss your numbers just based on the economics of it.
Well, also the Chinese car maker BYD is
crushing them.
Like they're up 30% year over year, already beating Tesla. They're building a new manufacturing plant the size of San Francisco. It's crazy.
But first of all, like Europe will buy them.
We'll be like driving our little Lada Teslas while everyone else drives. It'll be like, Hungary in the 80s.
If we unwind the clock and ask ourselves why Elon Musk decided to endorse and help elect Donald Trump, I actually think the fate of Tesla in China was a not insignificant part of the equation. And what was happening at the time was the Chinese government hadn't and still hasn't given him approval to operate full self-driving in China. And it has the domestic companies, and he's getting crushed there. Why he needed to get in the game, why he needed to give himself leverage, why, all these things like that has been so fundamental to it. And so who knows? I mean, the flip side would be this car company's been through, can't count him out, blah, blah, blah. But it just, in speaking of mood shift, vibe shift, as we often do on the pod, like there's been a very, very palpable one. And I feel like even among his allies, kind of a reorienting towards, well, SpaceX is more interesting, which is stunning because so much of his wealth he has so much wealth in Tesla. But again, if the pie is big enough,
he's got a lot of pivot options. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you want to know that if like one thing can fail, you can always pivot to the next one. So he's just.
I'm not an expert on this, but isn't he? I mean, is there a point? I assume there's a lot of debt floating around against Tesla's stock, and there must be some price at which that starts to become a real problem.
The people Musk always has in his corner are the money men, for lack of a better word. And there's just no venture capitalist who wants to be on bad terms with him, either because they want in on the next deal or they just want preferential terms in the SpaceX secondaries, which he controls literally based on how many people emailed him in what order and how he feels about them that day. So apparently, if you're a SpaceX investor and his CFO, the game is to just email them constantly. Sounds bizarre. This is how private technology works, folks. And so you just won't find and yes, there are investors he's closer to and so forth, but no one wants out of that game. And it was interesting. I mean, you see this in the banking front, and now you have, one of his chief bankers, Michael Grimes, formerly of Morgan Stanley, in DC, overhauling the Commerce Department, running this alleged new sovereign wealth fund. So being actually, it's funny. You say friend of blank, foe would be friend of Elon. But being a friend of Elon is not a trade you want to sort of bet against. I mean, even Jamie Dimon, I think, has publicly sort of said and tried to patch up a rift. So that's still sort of ginormous power.
The fundamentals look bad on Tesla, and it looks like the stock is incredibly overvalued. But you've been able to say that for 7 years now or more. I mean, it's it was always right. Okay, it's a nice car. It's a great car, actually. I drive a Tesla, and it's the idea that it is worth all of the car companies was always absurd.
Do you want to explain to them how you charge your Tesla? Because it's demented.
Tell them. Is there a hack?
If you live in a beautiful New York residence that does not have parking, how do you do that, Nick?
Thank you, Axel Springer, for the house. No, I mean, it's actually more and more popular now, but you have a stoop and it goes to the street. You can kind of get a charger on the stoop. And if you run the cord over the sidewalk and put like a little, yellow, hazard.
Like a speed bump? You're creating speed bumps?
Yeah, and I'm not the only one. I think this is a total gray zone in New York City.
Deranged.
It's
wow.
I never go to again.
You better watch that stoop, Nick.
No.
People in New York are mean.
Thanks for blowing up my spot, Ben. All right.
So now when anyone sees the stoop in New York with the Tesla cord, they know where you live.
That's true.
Yeah. What about for Ben and Nick? Okay, so the DOGE, what is the sentiment on the parade of tech billionaires who are currying Trump's favor at the moment? I mean, do you see that from your perspective? And do DC insiders have the same attitude as like, oh, how cute, we still run the show?
I think maybe this is sort of my view and the view of some people I talk to, that Satya looks really, really smart for staying out of that photo. And that there's a sense when you talk to some of the people around some of these, these tech billionaires that like, they're like, oh, we finally solved politics. We finally figured it out. Like we just go all in on Trump, then we never have to worry about politics and it's gonna be great. And in what is it like? If the Democrats take the House, we're talking in 20 months, there will be a corruption committee convened, which will have Mark Zuckerberg, Tim Cook, Sundar Pichai, and whoever talking in great detail about every penny that was directed, and I think they'll want to scalp. Like I think the Democrats will really want to destroy one of those people, and I think Elon is probably too big to fail for the U.S. government. So like if I were Mark, I'd be really worried. I think he's like wildly overexposed, and did not manage to make friends with the Republicans. Like they think this whole thing is funny. Obviously, it is funny. It's impossible not to think it's funny. And then the Democrats really are out for blood now. And so I actually think there's a reason that business leaders in the United States typically do not do stuff like that, and that they'll probably wind up regretting it. Or who knows? Maybe Trump will rule for 1,000 years and it'll have been a great bet.
It's a good hot take.
Now I'm just sort of saying things I probably shouldn't say, but it's unclear to me why Satya didn't show up to the photo, and I think it's very possible Elon did not want him on the stage.
One of us should report that out.
Well, I don't know. What is knowing, Ben? What is knowing? Knowing is two sources. Put it on a t-shirt. But what I do know is that Microsoft and Satya are certainly savvy enough to make us all think, which, that he purposely sat it out, especially if, the scenario you outlined, which is kind of probable to me, right? As opposed to like transpires. But I think there was Sam Altman wasn't on the stage either, and Elon is in a brutal lawsuit at the time, even more high stakes with him with OpenAI and Microsoft. So
that you as a business leader want to like go all in on one of two parties in a system that is like swinging wildly back and forth just seems incredibly high risk. And maybe what you do is you resign.
Unless you don't believe it's going to swing back and forth. Unless to your point, like they're like, oh, it's game over. It's going to be red for.
I think they all think it's going to swing back. I think they all think it's going to swing back. They just don't know when.
And so they just think the short-term implications of not supporting him is more risky than.
There's a pack mentality too. I mean, you could see it. I mean, you could see them look at each other over whether or not they should stand or clap at every moment in that speech. Especially Tim and Sundar. A lot of looking at other people. A lot of looking at other people.
This is not an insider's take, but I just remember when like you didn't really want to get way out in front on your politics. You didn't really want to like tell everyone what your views were. And you kind of just said, that's not really a wise business decision.
Yeah, that was like 6 months before Trump was elected, Nick, to be clear.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you think Zuck was the one who broke this, Jess? I feel like Zuck was the first to fold, and then they all followed.
Well, no, the information broke the Andreessen Horowitz.
Yes.
Well, but they swung twice, didn't they? They swung in both directions.
And then one swung one way and one swung the other, and it's very unclear where one of them is swinging now.
And Mark, in his defense, has always been a conservative, I think. So maybe didn't swing at all.
I think he's a pragmatist.
That's what I want to jump on, which is like the pragmatist element of it. Like this, he's going to do these things for us. Like Trump is like, promised a lot over a long career and never delivered, like never.
Correct. This is also a stunning question I've wondered. Yes.
And if they wanted one thing, it's got to be to lay off the antitrust stuff. And if there's one thing that Trump is not doing, it's lay off the antitrust stuff.
Ben and Nick, will the Wiz deal go through?
Oh, I don't know, Ben. What do you think?
I'm not an expert, but I think that Gail Slater and Andrew Ferguson are really not these people's. They're not the friends of Silicon Valley. They're not the friends of our investment bankers.
I think what I've learned in all this is how much people hated Joe Biden, like really hated Joe Biden, and in a way that was not clear to me, honestly, before all of this, and Lena too. They hated Lena Khan too.
I totally agree, and really felt that the administration was just like throwing up walls at every turn.
They were afraid to say it because they were afraid of retribution from the Biden administration because they didn't, they didn't say it. And then as soon as Biden's out, you hear like Albert Bourla told our guy Andrew Edgecliffe Johnson, just went really, how vicious the Biden people were, how they hated capitalism, all this stuff that you did not hear in the Biden years because these guys were trying to do business with them.
And also Andreessen picked up, I think Andreessen saw a point, maybe somewhat defensively, to like go on a media tour with the Times and the Free Press and all these places where he had been quietly pulling the strings, but maybe not publicly pulling the strings or trying to influence the conversation. Not that he was being successful. Ben, I suppose the calculus for a lot of these leaders who are pretty smart and know the pendulum's going to swing and know the knives are going to be out is that the knives are going to be out anyway. And that their future for the next decade is being dragged before Washington, is the bad press, is being, and it's sort of like, we published a story recently about that sort of got some documents on the number of hours all the Meta executives are expected to testify in the upcoming trial. Story. And the CMO is temporarily moving to DC because of it. And executives are sending notes around warning their teams they're going to be grumpy. And
really?
I think at some point there is this sort of resignation to it. And so if you take that as sort of par for the course, it's like, are you going to compromise your next big data center?
Yeah, totally.
Which you need to stay ahead in the arms race.
No, and this is we're sort of headed into a more mixed economy, right? In which the government has a huge role, and and I think it's sort of a one-way ratchet, right? Like both parties are talking about industrial policy, about government spending, and one of the things that is you can call it corruption or not, but it's executives who cozy up to the party of power get more money, and their businesses do better.
When you say mixed economy, do you mean through like the sovereign wealth fund, or you mean just through these, so many other ways?
Washington picking winners and losers, and both in terms of sectors and in terms of companies. That was the IRA. That's, the Trump sort of manufacturing push, the tariffs. It's, not that it ever, Washington always had a big role in the economy, but it just seems like we're headed to a world where business leaders have to spend more time in Washington because the U.S. government's making decisions about which companies can succeed and fail.
So TechCrunch had a story about an AI company called 11X. They create virtual agents for customer support that actually personified agents, not like agentic frameworks, which we talk about way too much on this podcast. But it's fine. We had gotten a lot of rumblings out of this company anonymously as well. So clearly they were just like hitting the tech press. But what TechCrunch reported was that they were saying they had customers they didn't have on like slide decks and websites, and that they were misleading in how they calculated their revenue because they kept you on an annual contract if you were there for 3 months, which many people apparently tried it out and canceled. I think they reported that Andreessen Horowitz was going to sue, but the founder over this, but then sort of walked that back or something like that. But it's basically the latest of the numbers don't add up, but with this extra special sauce of AI into it. Mm. And I'm reminded, Ben, you had an incredible story similarly about Aussie Media and the numbers not adding up. You're looking perplexed about this story. I'm pretty sure you remember it, but there were multiple components to it, right? There was personifying executives on calls, but wasn't there also a fuzzy math component to it.
All over the place. I mean,
I was in media. Didn't they say they had like so much in revenue, like $35 million in revenue, and it was like not real revenue?
It's funny. The realest thing about them was the revenue. Like they were telling they were lying to their advertisers about traffic. The revenue was also sometimes fudged. They were lying to their investors about what other investors invested. They were lying about all sorts of stuff, including who you were talking to on the phone. But one of the funny things, it was Carlos Watson was convicted of securities fraud, which is hard, and but one of the strange things about it was that the revenue, relative to the other things they were lying about, the revenue was kind of real.
Huh.
Just the media wasn't real. You never saw it in the wild.
The media business, right? Amazing.
Very hard to get into that kind of legal trouble in the media business, fortunately.
It reminds me of Enron a little bit. I mean, they had made up revenue, and I don't want to categorize it in the same way at all, but Groupon had their whole new definition for revenue. But what you're describing sounds it sounds like fraud.
It sounds just like straight fraud.
Fraud. Yeah.
Brit, what was your reaction when you saw it?
Well, I think it's just all fuzzy math and funny marketing, right? So they're calculating their ARR, their annualized recurring revenue, based on people that are not only full-time customers who have signed up for a plan, but also people that are in their trial, which is not paid revenue.
And had canceled. Like people who were in a trial but ended the trial.
Yeah. And Airtable is an example. It was did a trial, was not a fit. And we sign up for stuff all the time at Offline, either for operational efficiency of running the firm, or just we need to know about the new tech that exists. So we just try stuff. And if every time I signed up for something with my offline.vc email, I thought maybe they would count my revenue as a customer and put our logo on their website, that would be insane. And they're putting their logo, Airtable's logo was on their website as a brand using this product. And so I honestly think the founder was just naive. There are a lot of young founders in this industry who just don't know when you have to get permission. I think that's getting more and more blurry, by the way, with AI right now. When can I use someone's name and likeness or anything like that? As journalists, I think you all know that you have to quote, source, get permission, fact check, all of this stuff. And founders don't actually get this type of schooling these days. It's very rogue out there in the wilderness of the new startup frontier.
It's I remember Business Insider CFO, just the paranoia a good CFO has about the way you put the numbers. Because by the way, they're the ones who go to jail if it's done wrong. So they're pretty much
totally. Exactly.
So you think this founder's naive? Okay, Brit, I don't know. But
I think the ARR thing is one thing. It's putting logos on your website. I think a lot of founders do this. I think, that don't ask for permission, or it's they were quoted in one small thing, and so they think they can put the New York Times logo, and just I always discount logos in particular, but the ARR thing is crazy. That's
it's a supply and demand thing, right? So there's an enormous amount of demand from investors to get into AI startups that sound like they're great. There's a limited supply of founders who actually can deliver on that. And so it just starts to thin out. And this is what happens when there's a lot of capital flying in. You're going to meet the fakers who can't fake it till you make it. They just are fakers. And so
well, that was I'm we're at this moment in the cycle. That was what went off for me, where you're seeing, in part because, it appears Andreessen Horowitz is not suing them, but there also appears that they were getting pressure from their investors on some of this. And so, that just sort of, I think we're going to see a lot more of this. And AI in particular seems very predisposed to confusing math. We've talked about all these deals where the investment is actually coming in the form of cloud credits, which are then ending up being double counted as revenue for the cloud companies and so forth.
One of the things that I've observed about AI recently is it's weirdly commoditized for an incredibly advanced technology. If you want to find a video, a technology that can take a video and make it so your mouth looks like it's speaking a foreign language, you have 20 options. And that's magic, you know?
Well, Sam is slowly merging into like facets of AI are defensible, but not all AI. I'm not an AI investor, except for when I am. And so like if there's like proprietary data or like you've, created a go-to-market strategy that's unlike other, like there are a lot of reasons why you should invest in AI, but like we talked about it this week at offline, like we got pitched another legal AI startup that's like, it'll create your legal docs for you in 5 seconds. There are like 50 right now. And people have dumped so much money in this in the venture ecosystem. That's stupid. And so I do think there are a lot of these types of technologies that are just going to be totally commoditized, to your point. And by the way, segue, like, have you guys used the new image generator on ChatGPT that launched
No,
this
Brit,
week?
we don't have time. Like we're not as tinkery as you.
I'm not. So good. I feel really bad for graphic designers, but you should all be using it for your media platforms because it makes actually good images of like, you could put a picture of a product like this Topo Chico and just upload a photo of Topo Chico with a white background and say like, put a young 20-somethings girl at the beach drinking a Topo Chico, and it'll give you like 5 options that look perfect for like an image you would insert into an article or an ad or anything like that. It can make print ads, it can make digital ads, it can make posters, and it is all with prompting, and it's actually good.
Well, commodity technology wiping out creative industries.
and also its own investors. Incredible.
Well, we can, and let's wrap on this point, Brit. You wanted to pick these gentlemen's brains on AI in the media business, and maybe specifically like, either an incredible use case you're seeing already or an unusual use case you're seeing already, or even like if you had a wish list, because a lot of technologists listen to this pod, like what you would like to see built, but also what you're seeing now, because I think there's more that meets the eye.
Well, and like the barometer of fear versus excitement, I'd be curious to hear.
Sure. Ben, you go.
I mean, I suspect we're on the we are sort of out. Nick and I are probably outliers in that I suspect we both do tinker a lot and love it. And for the place that it's most sort of immediately valuable is video and audio production. Like this was sort of the clunkiest, heaviest, most expensive part of media. Like incredible. Just makes those things cheaper and easier. Great. Other things like boring copy editing. Great. Things like that. But no, to me, the most exciting part is just that this is sort of a rant that I've been subjecting my staff to, but I really don't see it. Like I'm not letting them ask our developers to help them build AI tools. Like you can really in Google Apps script without knowing anything about, you can really like vibe code yourself some nice tools, and Gina Chua build us a style, like kind of a copy editing style guide that's now in our Google Docs, and
wow. And, how'd you build that?
You ask, and I built a tool that, should I talk about this? It's sort of embarrassing, but it
yeah, definitely.
You can basically, you can say, what would JD Vance say about this story? And so I built something that will have a number of people who are like the most obnoxious voices on social media dunk on your story before it's been published, so that you sort of anticipate that.
Pre-dunk.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Someone asked me about that in an all hands, actually.
Yeah.
So I think there
are PR firms also, or I think it's a thing PR firms do a lot. But like, also it took me like a Sunday afternoon, like an idiot who doesn't know how to code, using ChatGPT and Gemini, and just to build it, and it's like pretty good.
I am so stunned that you can do this. With all due respect for your many talents, I'm impressed.
Yeah, I was impressed with how easy it was. I mean, really amazing.
Says a lot about AI, Jess.
We have a retreat soon. Should I carve out like a demo, like vibe coding?
Yeah, but make the journalists vibe code, because they know what they want.
Ask for money.
No, this is the problem.
This is the one you two are coming to. This is the one you two are coming to. I'm asking, should we have vibe coding in Jackson Hole?
Yeah, totally. But also to make the journalists do it, because it's fundamentally like not a technical thing anymore. It's like, what is the thing you want? It's really, I don't know. So that for me is like super fun and exciting. Also, right, I thought for 2 seconds, oh yeah, we should charge this as a product. And it's like, well, actually, if I built this in 4 hours, that's like not defensible. That is the least defensible thing
you can
in the
charge
world.
for it in the short term. I think there's a world where you can get like rapid iteration cycles of these products where like people don't realize they can rebuild it for like a month, but you can maybe you can make some like a few $1,000s, you know.
Well, you know, we're a media company. We'll take it.
I was going to say, as your investors, don't do this. We're not going to let you pivot to vibe coding. Nick, to wrap us up, how are you? I mean, I think of you with no offense. I have to change. Ben's now maybe tied, but I think of you as one of my more AI forward journalists.
That's because I just
what are you doing
early? But yeah, but by the way, Ben, you don't need AI to tell you what JD Vance thinks. Just text your guy Tucker Carlson, who's going to tell him what to think, and then you'll know.
Elon would be the equivalent in my world, right? Because then I'm like, oh, this is going to be a marketing opportunity. I should get ahead of it, right?
We're using AI from like early stages here. Our team is extraordinarily enthusiastic about it, and it's just sort of like, once you leave, about a year and a half ago, I was like, Ben, should I go to a company? And he's like, yes. And one of the reasons why is you just leave a lot of your old ways of doing things behind. And it's actually not hard once you're doing a new thing that you're just like, well, of course I'm going to use all the easy tools to make this easier. And so we use, I've been really impressed with deep research so far as a tool to help us vet a story idea very quickly. There was this time when you do like videos are a huge investment to go make, right? And so part of what's expensive about it is like, once you commit, you're doing it. And so you have to like do a little bit of research ahead of time to find out if there's a story there. Whereas like with an article, you can kind of like begin and then just abandon it. But you need to know that you're actually going to have a video. And so deep research can in 15 minutes give you 25 pages to kind of give you like, oh yes, the comparison you want to make in this is a real comparison. And there's lots of, citations. My frustration with AI, and maybe Ben's got the solution, is just that it's hard to share a win. It's difficult to like, I have a little bit of success in my little like, using ChatGPT or Gemini or something to like do something. I'm like, turn to Rebecca, who's our chief of staff here. Rebecca, there's this way we can do a thing. And it's like, it's hard to communicate that,
You can build it. I mean, the thing is, you can build it into Google Docs. You can get a tab. And this is the thing I did not know, but with AppScript, you can put a new tab after file edit. There's like my weird little app, and you can just build that into the Google Docs for your whole team. It's pretty, it's interesting.
Do you have like Ben bot like in the doc being like all your pet peeve words get highlighted? I have thought about,
because my edits are all exactly the same, which is like dial this lead up to 11, like insert 3 errors in the second paragraph. Like I have thought about, I could probably just make that a bot and
take that apostrophe out of its or randomly do it.
Like add random.
I love
those. Yeah.
Well, you guys had really great answers to that question. I think that's going to be really interesting to folks. A good question, Brit. And let it. I think it also cuts against the perception that all media companies are backwards, technology hating, whatever. Right? I mean, those are some of the coolest,
just the
very
legacy
cool use
media
cases.
Yeah, if I could add like one more note of optimism on it, like from my perspective, like there are two things like. In journalism, there's sort of at one end is gathering facts that are not on the internet and putting them on the internet. And then there's a lot of other things, writing and producing in the middle. Yeah. And then at the other end is connecting with is a human being who you trust connecting with another human being. Those two ends are very hard for AI to do. Everything in the middle is sort of up for grabs. And
also, I think those two ends are the fun.
Yeah, those two ends are why you do it.
Totally.
That's like, I feel exactly the same way. Well, gentlemen, we are very grateful. We covered a lot of ground. We gave people a lot of substance, which they might not be used to on this podcast. So I'm curious how they're all going to react to all your great insights around the view ahead in Washington, what it means for tech founders, and so on and so forth. So always a pleasure. Don't forget to check out Dynamo. Will we be able to watch the new show?
Go to LinkedIn and follow us.
Business Explains the World. Yeah, we're not... Yeah. Okay, go to LinkedIn, follow Nick there, sign up for all Semafor's newsletters, come to their big event. How are you feeling about the big event, Ben?
Really excited. It'd be a huge gathering of CEOs in Washington.
Is it a CEO summit?
Huge CEO summit in Washington. And to what we were talking about before, CEOs really want to be in Washington right now. The World Economy Summit. Check it out.
And also check out Mixed Signals. So with that, thank you to everyone for listening, for commenting, to our great back channel, for giving us awesome ideas every week. Let us know how you felt about this gang. Maybe we can have them back in the future. And we'll see you here next week for another episode of More or Less. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Find more information about each episode in the show notes and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.